This episode contains references to suicidal thoughts from the start. Listener discretion is advised.
I've been through extreme physical and mental robust tests that make me the best soldier in the country. And at the time, I really thought nothing could touch me. But now I know that was not the case. Actually, as soon as I left, I realized how fragile I really was. I started having thoughts that maybe it would be better off for everybody if I wasn't around. And I never could have imagined myself saying that before that moment. And when I was a Royal Marine, I was invincible. And I had no sense of direction. I had nothing that I was proud of myself. I had no community, and I felt helpless. We're all vulnerable people at the end of the day, and you can build up walls as much as you like, but trust me, when I just let go of the fact that I wasn't going to talk about it, and I let people in and let them understand what I was going through, it changed my life.
Kyle, welcome to The Meaning of Men. If I was meeting you for the first time, how would you describe yourself in a few sentences?
I would say I'm a British family man who lives in America, constantly in pursuit of achieving a better version of myself. A former Royal Marine Commando and a firefighter, and an adventurer and a husband and dad to two incredible girls. Yeah.
This show is all about exploring lots of different ways about what it means to be a man. I think what's awesome about this episode is we're going to be cramming a lot into one episode. So we're going to be talking about two very extreme careers that you were just highlighting there, obviously being the Royal Marines and now being a firefighter. We're going to be talking about your family life, how you are as a dad and a husband, and also this huge transition that you had moving to the US and everything that entailed too. Having said all that, what would you like people to take away from our conversation today?
I think I'd like them to take away that no matter how strong or masculine you may appear on the outside, it's okay to be vulnerable with mental health. And to know that even the very masculine men may be suffering as well. I've definitely been in some masculine professions and around a lot of masculine men my whole life. And some of the people that you would not expect to have problems with mental health at all, some of them are in the worst situation possible. And we definitely have to make it okay to talk about. And that's what I would like people to take from today. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what the family life was like, and some of that journey in between there to what led you into the first area that we're going to talk about in depth today around you being a Royal Marine.
Okay, so my dad was in the army for 34 years, and I was actually born in Germany before the Berlin Wall came down. In a place called Munster in northwest Germany. And we lived there on and off between being posted back to the UK and into Germany till I was about 5 or 6. And movement was pretty frequent. You just kind of rolled with it. I mean, it's all I ever knew. Until I was about 7 years old, when my parents realized that there was no way we could continue doing this. Like, because I think I had 6 or 7 schools by the time I was 7. And it was disrupting my education. I was being bullied at the time as well at the current school I was at. It was kind of a rough school, rough area. My dad was a low rank in the army at the time, so we weren't always in the nicest of areas. And so they put me in boarding school when I was 7 years old. And that was the best thing they could have ever done for me. It gave me a stable schooling, constant friends. You know, at first I would come home every weekend, and because we only lived about an hour away, and then as my dad got posted elsewhere, it could be 4 hours away or whatever, I would only come home on the holidays. So I'd come home, summer, winter, Christmas, and Easter, and then half term. And 2 years later, my brother joined me, and then we were there till I was 16. And then I went to another place that I lived at called Peter Simmons College in Winchester, and was there for 2 years, and then went to St. Mary's University, which I kind of only did because it was like the expectation for everybody at the college that I went to, that they were going to go to university, and all my friends did it. I didn't really know what I was doing there. And then I kind of flitted between jobs in London, and had no idea what I was doing, and then joined the Royal Marines after having done some travel in America, where actually I met my wife.
Do you think that quite varied upbringing with so much change has, in the long term, helped you in terms of giving you a little bit more maybe resilience? Obviously, it must have been tough at the time, but like longer term, do you think that's benefited you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I always kind of joke that my mom and dad because my brother lives in America as well. I always joke that like they made us really explore moving anywhere else. They hate that now because they kids and their grandkids live in a different country, and my parents still live in the UK. And I feel horrendous for them in that regard. But yeah, that constant moving around and being away from home and stuff like that only increased the want to see different places, and naturally those places took us to places that we might want to live at. So yeah, I mean, it definitely create a resiliency, and I think being, especially at boarding school, like I know for a fact that being around those other group of boys at the school, and all my friends, and constantly not really needing my family too much other than for holiday time, definitely lent into what I was going to do in my career. I as soon as I left school and university, I lost that needing of guys being around me all the time, then I was like, right, I need to join something that's going to give me that. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be the person I am today without that upbringing, for sure.
What ultimately inspired you to join the Royal Marines? It sounds like it was almost being bedded in at a very early age.
I would say it was more like a gradual process. I I mean, like on the summer vacations, for example, we'd go to my dad's work, and I would be surrounded by these extremely masculine guys. You'd never get away with this in the workplace now, but there'd be like pornography on the walls. There'd be, like it was just chaos. And like I would go into this and I'd just be looking at it like a 10-year-old boy, and you go in the bathroom or the toilet and you just be like, what is going on? And it was just embedded in me as a young age. And then all my friends obviously were army kids as well. And we grew up in at the school playing games like Manhunt, and we would get in the woods and we would play, because it was in the New Forest, which is a huge, obviously, wooded area, and we would build bases, and we would wear camouflage. Dad would give us cam cream and we'd take it to school. We was just slowly, like, you would be, I mean, I can tell you, we had a group of us that made a base, and we used to pretend that we were soldiers, like our dads, and we would practice fighting each other, and like we kind of thought that we were like our dads. And it'd make me super proud, even if my dad didn't realize it. Like, but when he used to come pick us up on a Friday to go home for the weekend, he would sometimes come in his uniform, and I'd be like, oh, my dad has like this like aura about him, that I was really proud to be his son, and yeah, it was definitely a gradual process. Like, I wanted to make my dad proud, and he was definitely proud when I eventually became a Royal Marine. So yeah, I kind of achieved that goal at the time. So yeah.
You've mentioned a few times there the word masculinity, and I'd be really interested to know how your time in the Royal Marines has shaped or changed your view of masculinity? Like how you thought about it maybe growing up when you saw your dad and your perceptions from the outside to when you're actually in it, how has that maybe changed and evolved over time?
I would say joining the Royal Marines and being in the Royal Marines definitely enhanced that outlook of, you know, they make you feel like you're invincible. Um, they make you feel like you're the best soldiers that could possibly even be anywhere in the world, right? Other than
Mm.
tier one special forces, they make you feel like you are the best. Like this is the elite of the elite. Um, you get through training and you get that green beret, and it's like you wear like this force field of like nothing can touch you, right? So when you're in, it's like anybody, nobody can do anything to you or say anything to you that can really hurt you, you know. And it does, it did make me, and I didn't think at the time that it really changed me, but it did. It made me a little bit arrogant. You know, like we weren't allowed to talk about what our job was outside to civilian people that you didn't know, unless they were close friends and stuff like that. It was always, you don't tell, you know, you shouldn't be showing off who you are, right? But what, you couldn't help it when you left the base. You couldn't, it's not that I wouldn't go out and I'd be like, I'm a Royal Marine and hey, like look at me and all the rest of it. But when you're around your family and when you're around your friends and stuff like that, you couldn't help but like almost stick your chest out and be like, look what I've achieved. And like nothing can touch me, and I am invincible. And I've been through extreme physical and mental robust tests that make me the best, in the best soldier in the country. And at the time I really thought I nothing could touch me. And but now I know that was not the case. So actually it made it me very fragile. Once as soon as I left, I realized how fragile I really was, which is crazy to say. But all the guys that I served with, they said that they went through something similar as well once they left. Like you lose your identity as a person. I'd invested so much into this person that I didn't think I was pretending to be. I thought this was me, right? I thought like it's almost, even when I didn't have my green beret on, it was like I really did, like I exuded this confidence that I was this person. But in reality, once it was gone, I was I felt like I was the weakest person. Felt like I was tiny, like the smallest person on the planet, and that like anybody could have got to me, you know. So it was very tough leaving, for sure.
Can you share any defining moments or a defining moment from your time in the Marines that has really had a lasting impact on you?
There's a few. I would probably say there was a time in training. So training is 32 weeks, and you go through all sorts of hell on in training to get your green beret. But we were coming towards the end of training, and the last exercise. So you do a series of exercises. They gradually get harder as you go through training, and you go out in the field for a week or whatever. And the last one that you do, it's called Final X. And during Final X, you're pushed tactically, and you have to navigate, and you have to do whole series of stuff on this exercise. Meanwhile, being wet, cold, hungry, tired, like extremely sleep deprived and stuff like that. And I remember we were on this long, they call it yomping in the Royal Marines. It's basically a long walk with weight on and all your gear, you know, your weapons and all the rest of it. And my feet had been wet the entire week, and they had created the constant rubbing of my boots against my foot whilst wet. I had created a massive, I mean, it looked like the size of a golf ball, blister on the back of my heel, and my feet were, I mean, in general, they just weren't looking good. And I was really suffering. And we were on this long march. We were coming towards the end of this march, and I turned to my the officer who was in charge of our troop, And I said, I was like, boss, like my foot is killing me. Like, I don't know how much further I can realistically go on with this. And he just turned around to me and he said, if your Green Beret was at the end of this march right now, would you and I told you that if you quit now, then you wouldn't get it, would you stop right now? And I said no. And he goes, there's your answer, you ain't going off this. And I just was like, yeah, I guess I'll push through then. But that told me that I really wasn't phased with putting myself in an uncomfortable position. Um and I was used to at that point being uncomfortable and doing whatever it took to achieve what I needed to achieve.
It's fascinating because I think a lot of people listening might think that they can't relate to a lot of the stuff that you were saying there. But what I gleaned from that was if you want something bad enough, you almost have to tell yourself why it is you're doing what you're doing. And whatever that is in any walk of life, we're always facing kind of battles every day. I think just kind of reminding yourself of your why. And I think from extreme examples like you were giving there to everyday things, I think can have an impact. Would you say that's fair?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody goes through different trials and tribulations. Like you said, like there's always going to be somebody's why is different to mine. Just because my career paths look extreme and they look great, they're really no different to anybody else's. Your challenge or someone else's challenge to me might look easy in physically, but at the same time what you do in a career or somebody else does in a career, it would be extremely hard for me. I couldn't sell anything to save my life. Like I couldn't sell myself. I would struggle in an interview, let alone, so like being a salesman would be impossible for me. That's so I find that pretty intriguing and pretty cool. And I admire people like that as well. So.
Before we dive back into the episode, if you're enjoying these conversations, please do hit that subscribe button and leave a review. These two actions really make a huge difference and help the show reach more people who can benefit from these discussions. Let's keep building this community together. Thanks for being part of it. Back to the episode. I think that's very refreshing hearing that from someone like you, because I think it is very easy to always be looking at someone that you perceive in your head is doing something very extreme, very admirable, but their perception of what you do could be just as much in that same direction as well. You kind of get trapped in your own mind a little bit, I think, sometimes, and perception versus reality can be a little bit conflicting. I want to switch gears a little bit now. So you've left the Royal Marines and you're on to your next big challenge now, which is moving to the States. Take me back to that time where you were preparing to move. What was going through your mind in terms of the change that you were about to embark on?
Well, I was excited. So when you give your notice in the Royal Marines, have to give a year's notice. And so, the lads were all joking with me because that was right when Donald Trump was running for president. But I was excited. I'd been to the States many times before and obviously met my wife there. And so I was excited to start this new life. It was kind of the unknown, and I'm used to the unknown a little bit. But I really thought that it was going to be great. And it has been, but I definitely faced some challenges when I first left. When I first left, I remember I left the Royal Marines on the 16th of December 2016. I believe that was the date. And by the 21st of December, I was in the States and I was left the UK behind. Right. So I had about a week to say goodbye to everybody. And that was hard, really hard, because and it wasn't so much when I was saying goodbye, but when I got to the States and I'd realized how not that I was alone because I had Ellie, and at that point, my first daughter Mila had been born. So I had this challenge of having a new kid. She was about, I want to say she was about 6 months old at the time, and so I wasn't alone. And Ellie's parents supported us. We were at their place for about a week before we moved to Phoenix because they live in Kansas City, and we moved to Phoenix. But I distinctly remember I have this. I will never forget this. I was in her bedroom in Kansas City in her parents' house, and I remember sitting on her bed. I was in the room on my own, and I sat on the bed, and I was just like, "Holy fuck!" Like I just gave up everything I know. Like I was on my effectively on my own, like to make this work with my wife and newborn baby, and I was terrified. Like I just left my career which I worked extremely hard to be good at. I'd built up a great reputation at work. I'd left my family, all my family, apart from my brother. My brother lived in Boston at the time, but I'd left my whole family, my mum, my dad, uncles, aunts, grandparents. Grandparents were getting old, so, I didn't know if that was going to be the last time I saw them. And my friends, not just in the military, but outside, university friends, everybody I knew that lived up in London. That was so I just had this feeling of like, oh shit, like what did I just do? Like I in that moment I kind of regretted it. I was like, oh no, like this is gonna be really tough. And I was moving to I we were moving to Phoenix. I'd never even been to Phoenix. I'd never set foot in that desert ever, right? So I had no idea what to even expect, right? The only thing that we were moving there because we didn't want to live in a place where there was harsh winters, and her aunt lived down there, and one of her best friends at the time lived down there. So we were just like, hell with it. Let's go see what Phoenix is like. We moved down there, and it was like a different world. I was like, what is going on? And it was very, very tough at first. I've never felt so alone and so vulnerable. There was one other time when I felt extremely vulnerable, but that was a really hard point in my life. Yeah, that was tough.
So many things there that you were dealing with in a relatively short period of time, becoming a dad, and I know that from experience, all the things that go with that. And just imagining that without my network of friends and family is incredibly difficult. Leaving the career that as you said, you'd built up to as well, and probably losing a bit of your sense of identity, I guess, from going through such a clear career that you wanted to do and you loved, to now this kind of huge uncertainty about, well, what were you going to do? And I guess was some of your identity, or a lot of your identity, probably tied up in the Royal Marines, like how that had been built up as well, and that had been taken away. Like how was that? How were those emotions going on for you at the time as well?
Yeah, 100%. Like my identity had just been stripped from me. Like now nobody cared about what I did. Now like my 6 month old daughter doesn't know that like I'd just been like one of the most elite soldiers that are, at least in the British military, and then across the world. She don't care. My wife don't care. People in the States don't care unless you're in the United States military. Like, and so I was just like, wow, like that is all gone, all gone. I don't have any of that anymore. So um, now I'm just like in my head, I got to wrap my mind around the fact that I'm no longer this invincible person, and I've now got to build from ground zero, nothing. And yeah, that was, I'm not gonna lie, that was really hard to to deal with, but um got got through it with some struggles. but I never used to talk about it to anybody either. My wife didn't know at the time I was struggling with it. I just kind of kept that inside, and struggling with the idea of talking about it. I never used to, because in the Royal Marines it was just like, oh, keep it to yourself. Like, you don't really betray like any weakness. You don't tell people that you're having negative thoughts or that you're feeling depressed or anything like that. But now I was really feeling that, and I didn't tell anybody. And the way I looked at it as well is, my wife had only ever known me as this one person. If I start telling her like what I really think, like, what's she going to start thinking about me? So, is she going to question everything about our relationship? Is she going to question us moving to the States? Like, I didn't want to tell her this stuff, even though I really should have been. And so, yeah, that was not fun. I can tell you, keeping that inside was not fun at all. So, yeah.
Was there one particular point during this period that was a real low that you look back on now and you think that was about as bad as it gets?
So when we first left Phoenix, we had our second daughter in Phoenix, and we realized we needed a community around us that was going to support us with these kids. And so we moved back to Kansas City, to be closer to her parents. Well, in fact, for the first year, we lived with her parents until we got on our feet because we had no jobs. So they luckily took us in for about a year, and which had its challenges as well, as you can imagine. um, and for me, it was really bad because in my mind, it was really bad. To me, this was my lowest I'd ever been. I had a job as I was like a league manager at a soccer facility, indoor soccer facility. I was on, and I didn't really enjoy it at all. It was working like 6 days a week, long days. There was, I really didn't get to see the family very much. It didn't earn great money either, so that didn't help. And I really just hated it. And it was during this moment as well that our youngest daughter was really suffering with bad ear infections, and so she would cry day and night, and we couldn't work it out. We couldn't work out what the problem was. We thought she was just a difficult baby. Babies cry, like, you're gonna have to get over that. So it was long nights. You're under the stress of not being able to take the pain away from your child. You're I would, obviously that caused tension between my wife and I. You know, that was about as close as I had ever seen us to breaking up, because we hated each other during this time. If she got up for the baby, or if she spent a lot more time, she would hate me for not doing it as well. And then I felt the same way towards her. And it was a lot of crying, from from Aspen, my youngest, and then from, well, quite honestly, both of us as well. Like, we were miserable. We weren't living in our own space. It was very, very difficult. And I haven't told many people this. I've told Ellie, and I told maybe a couple of guys at work, but I started having thoughts that maybe it would be better off for everybody if I wasn't around. And that, I never could have imagined myself saying that before that moment. And it's hard for me now. Even now, it's difficult for me to really admit that. Because I believed that, again, when I was a Royal Marine, I was invincible. And I was getting beaten at the time by a sick kid and not having a career I liked. And if you would have said that to me when I was in the Royal Marines, I would have laughed. I would have thought, that's ridiculous. Who who do I think I am, that like I can't just like overcome this small thing in my life? I had at the time, I had no sense of direction. I had nothing that I was proud of myself. I had no community, like no friends to lean back on. I and then my me and my wife hated each other at the time, and my daughter wouldn't stop crying. And I remember being in her room, and she was crying her eyes out, and I'm just holding her, and I was doing the same thing. I was crying my eyes out, and just like telling myself like you would be better off without me. I'm not making this situation any better, and I felt helpless, and I I'd never felt closer to. I started having thoughts about like how I would do it, and that's scary, really scary place to be. And the important thing for this podcast is for men to realize that for somebody as strong as I may have been perceived as beforehand, it meant nothing, because once I'd been stripped of all of these things, once all that was gone, I was left with just who was I as a person, and how was I going to overcome these this moment of, in my mind, was weakness, but it wasn't weakness. It was just, this is what everybody has to face, tough times at some stage, and you've it's hard to work out how to dig yourself out of that hole. And honestly, I can't tell you how I did get out of that hole. It might have been with the realization that I needed to get myself in a career like firefighting. I wanted to be back in a career that pushed me physically and mentally, and I still had the brotherhood to lean back on. And once I'd made that connection, that was what made me happy, and it wasn't going to be as a league manager in a soccer complex, then I started focusing on how do I achieve this goal. And once I had that goal, things started to come together for me. And that was huge. That was absolutely huge, because then I started delving into like, how do I get qualified for this and this and this? And I had goals, and I had an ambition, and I was striving to it. And um, for me, it turned around pretty quick once I realized that. So yeah, that was the lowest I'd ever been, for sure. Yeah.
But turn it round you did. And it sounds almost like that Green Beret story you were telling before, where you stopped and didn't think you could go on. And then you reached another level. You remembered your why. And you carried on. You were talking a little bit before about not being able to open up and talk. And I think people might be a little bit surprised about that, like listening to how brilliantly that you're articulating everything. What point did that change for you, where you felt more comfortable and confident to talk about how you were really feeling about things?
I think that changed when I had become a firefighter. And it wasn't necessarily when I first became a firefighter. It was when I joined so I when I started, I got through all the courses and all the rest of it. And then I got into a smaller department, and I was there for about 15 months. But when I got to the one I'm at now, they had a peer support team, right? They had a group of people that were trained to handle that handle the feelings and the emotions that came out with tough calls, right? And one of the guys on this team was a former infantryman in the U.S. Army, and he had been on multiple tours, like actual tours, not like my training ones that I'd done in the UK. Like he had seen the real thing, like, and seen some horrendous things, and he was very open about it. And he, his name's Jim, and Jim was, I mean, he would have talks with all these guys, these ridiculously masculine guys that, they're all jacked, and they're all, big tough guys and all the rest of it. And he would just stand there in front of all of us, and he would tell us exactly what he was going through and how low he had got to, and the steps he had taken to get out of the hole he was in. And I remember immediately after that, I saw him afterwards, and I said, "Thank you for talking about that." I went through not something similar that I've not got PTSD or anything like that he's got, but I'd gone through struggles with my identity, having left the Royal Marines, and I just I was so grateful that somebody else was willing to talk about it, and we talked back and forth over the months. We were on different shifts, so it was difficult to see him sometimes, but it was so refreshing to hear somebody be so vulnerable and it be okay. For me, that sent a strong message that was okay in this department to express how you feel. And after that, I was like, right, I'm just going to start talking. I didn't really say it a lot to the guys at work, but like, I then told Ellie immediately after that. I was like, I'm going to start talking to Ellie a lot more, and I should. She's my best friend. She's my wife. And I told her exactly how low I was at my lowest moment when I was, having thoughts about not being here anymore. She was very surprised, as you can imagine. But she appreciated it. Like, I didn't think she would appreciate me talking about it very much, but like, she really appreciated me being that open and honest with her, which is crazy to think that I would never say that to her in the first place. Like, that's the one person I trust more than anybody in the world. And I should be able to tell her exactly what I'm thinking, and the emotions that I'm going through and all the rest of it. But in that moment, it brought a lot of clarity to me. Like, I need to start talking about this. So yeah, that's what really helped me start talking. So yeah.
I'd love to get a bit of a sense of really what it's like to be a first responder and some of the skills that you've picked up in that role that you have then been able to transfer into everyday family life with your friends, etc.
Yeah, I mean, being a firefighter in the States, so we respond to all manner of calls, right? So we obviously go to fires, go to car wrecks, we have tech rescue, we have water rescue, um, we have all sorts of rescue, but the medical calls are the ones we go on most. So I would say probably 80% of our call volume is based on medical calls. Now that is different to in the UK, as I think about it. I think that medical calls aren't a big thing for firefighters in the UK, but in the States, it's like 80% of our call volume. Um, Having empathy with people is a huge part of our job. And obviously being caring with people's, not just their bodies as they're sick and they're injured and stuff like that, but just their emotions as well, is a huge part of this job. And sometimes, not it's just, with elderly people it's a bit different. They're more than willing to call you because they need help picking off the floor sometimes, or they have a genuine emergency that they need you for. But sometimes you get people that are just adamant they don't want to go, they don't need help. And um, just having people realize that it's okay to ask for help, um, whether that be a medical or just even somebody to talk to. Sometimes some people are just calling us because they need somebody to talk to, and we go in and we always assume that medically they need something, and so we check them out, and then sometimes there's nothing wrong with them, and really they just needed somebody to talk to. And we just making it a priority that no matter what you've got going on during your day, is that this person called you because they needed help in that moment, whether it be medically or just having somebody to talk to, is important to them. And just because it's not an emergency, you talking to them and making their day better is really important. And so having empathy for people is a massive part of our job. And sometimes I'm not great at it at home. Sometimes I can let I don't know if I let the job come back home with me and I'm angry, but sometimes I can be a little short with my kids. And I don't know whether that's to do with the fact that maybe I've had a long day or I've seen things or whatever, and I just don't have the patience for my kids. But then there's times where I also lean back on that empathy or that caring side at work and bring it back home and be like, this is how I might deal with it at work. Why can't I deal with it the same way at home? And understand where people might be coming from. Just because it's not my emergency or just because it's not my emotional struggle right now doesn't mean that they're not going through it. So I should do what I can to help. And so um, I definitely I'm not the finished article or perfect by any means at it, but it definitely helps me go into situations where people need a bit of help, and I'm more than willing to lend a hand. I'm always now looking to help people as opposed to making their life more difficult. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah.
It's really interesting because I was thinking about how you would possibly compartmentalize what you do at work and leave everything at work and then go home and be a father and a husband. But what you were saying there was, it seems like what you're able to do is identify some of the things that you do in work that will be a strength and bring that home and actually flourish that way.
Yeah, I don't actively think to myself like how can I take this skill and bring it home? But when I sit here and reflect on it, when you ask me the question, I sort of think to myself, yeah, I guess I kind of do that. Like that does help. Like when I'm at work, I'll bring it home and it will help me at home as well. I think the reverse is actually more true for our job, and it definitely affects me too. The reverse is that we've had a long night at work and we've been called out multiple times or something, and we come home and then like the family doesn't know or care necessarily, or that I haven't really expressed them the night we've had, and they just go, it's time to go to school, like it's time to do the normal things at home, it's time for me to, I can't just like forget about all my responsibilities at home. So you get frustrated that nobody understands what you're going through at home, but I'm also not telling them what I'm going through. So my wife she's pretty good about it, to be honest. I'll get in and she gauges within the first 10 seconds, like what sort of night I've had. And she can tell me, and I'm lucky right now because I'm at a slower station, but she'll tell me, she go, oh, you had a long night, didn't you? And I go, yeah. And she goes, and we have this thing as well where like we'll tell each other like what percentage we're at. And that's like 100% is you are good to do what you can do, whatever needs to be achieved today. And then there's, obviously you 50%, you're like, I've only got 50% in my tank. Like, can you help me out with some of this stuff? And then they're like 10% or whatever. You're like, I need you to take the reins today. Like, so, so, and luckily we don't have many days like that, but there have been some days like when, maybe we've been on a fire and we've been up all night and I just need to go to bed.
I want to finish our conversation today around fatherhood. And I'd love to get a sense from you how becoming a father has changed your perception on mental health, how you think about mental health, and fundamentally how you deal with mental health.
It's had a huge impact because so I'm not sure if this would be different if I had boys, but I got two girls. So they're very in tune with their emotions. And we encourage them to express how they're feeling. And for me that's like definitely the more healthy way to be. Now sometimes it can get a little bit too emotional, don't get me wrong. Like sometimes I'll be like, okay, pipe down, like I would really like you to stop like giving me all this emotion sometimes, and you can like, oh, I'm going to roll my eyes at this, um, but I would say, you know, my wife went through some tough times with bullying and stuff at school, and I just pray my girls don't deal with that, um, but that has had a massive impact on her as a kid and had a massive impact on today. So she's constantly worried about, especially my oldest, she's a little bit more sensitive. My second, you probably know this, second born is a lunatic. So she doesn't really have a lot of crazy, like very expressive emotions apart from making me the punch bag. But my oldest is way more sensitive. And it's important that she knows that me and her mum are here for her to, just tell us anything you're going through. And so every day I'll ask her, like, how's her day been at school? We'll do a thing at the table. It's called like high low buffalo, and it'll be like, what's the high of your day? What's the low of your day? And what was something funny in the day that happened? And you know, we don't do it every meal time, but sometimes we'll do it, and it will just help my kids, especially my oldest, get something off their chest, And there's going to be something we're going to struggle with as parents. Yourself, you'll struggle with it, I'm sure, as well at some point. But I'm definitely prepared to accept that challenge, of riding this roller coaster, especially when they get to be teenagers and boys become a thing and all the rest of it. It's going to be huge, and I just want them to know that they can talk about it with me. And it might be more stuff that they actually want to talk to their mom about, but as long as they got somebody to talk to, that's the most important thing.
What experiences, good and bad, from your time in the Royal Marines, from your time as a first responder, and also that transition from moving from the UK to the US? What are some of the experiences that you want to be able to share with your kids and help them maybe come through some of those challenging times that you had?
um I definitely want my kids to be really resilient, like, and just kind of roll with the punches. And I know that they're 6 and 8 years old right now, but these lessons start when you're young. Like, I definitely picked things up when I was 8 years old that have shaped me into being the person I am today. And I'm hoping that I can imprint those lessons on my kids in some way. Not everything that I've had, because some of that stuff is can be negative, especially considering, I don't know how this would have a different impact on, a girl than boys. I don't know whether, if my daughters will respond the same way as I did. So I'm definitely not pushy. I would say my dad was a little push heavy with me, in regard to, being tougher, and, he would always kind of, it wasn't really a choice of mine, but he would make me do extreme events and stuff like that. And, um, he would be like, okay, I'm taking you out of school today, we're going to go and do a mountain marathon in Scotland, and we'd be away for 2 days. And I didn't really get like, we'd be away for 2 days in the mountains, running 5 hours on the foot, like doing crazy stuff that you wouldn't usually do. And I thank him for that, because it shaped me for the person I am. But I definitely want my kids to not feel like they have to impress me all the time. Like, I always felt, and I don't want if my dad hears this, I don't want him to really take offense to it, but I always felt the need to impress my dad. And, that is probably one of the reasons why I joined the Royal Marines. Um, Now my whole family was in the military, but he was the main reason. And when I didn't make the SBS because I got the injury, I was disappointed more for my dad. It was his dream to go SAS, and, like, I remember getting out of Royal Marine training, and he immediately, the first dinner we had together, he said, "So when are we going SBS?" Like, because I didn't get it, I was more disappointed that I hadn't achieved it, to to please my dad than I was for myself. And I don't want my girls to think like that. Like, I don't want them to be like, my dad wants me to do this, so I'm going to do this. You know, like, if they don't want to, if I want them to do something that makes them happy, like, if singing and being on stage, like my oldest daughter, I can hear her right now, she's singing. As I'm sat in the garage, I can hear her singing right this second. If being on stage and being in theatre it makes you happy, then I will 100% support it. I will go through to the ends of the earth to make it happen, right? So yeah, I appreciate what my dad did and what he was trying to do. And again, I wouldn't be the man that I am today without him, but I would like to steer my kids in a different direction, I think. So yeah.
We started our chat today with me asking you a question, and that question was, what do you want people to take from our conversation today? And I'm going to finish with that question because we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of different things and so much. And I want to have maybe one main takeaway that people might have. So what do you hope that people have ultimately taken away from our chat today?
I'm hoping that people can see that somebody as quote unquote as masculine as what I might be perceived to be is really actually I'm a big softie, right? Um and I have the same emotions as any normal person. I feel when I feel low, I get upset, and I sometimes tell people what I'm thinking, sometimes I don't. But it's okay to feel that way and then to talk about it. Like, talking about it has been huge for me. Like, talking about, you know, how I'm feeling, or if I've come off a bad call, like where, you know, I've seen kids die and stuff like that. Like, oh, you know, that is an extreme scenario that not everybody gets to see every day, but doesn't mean that my emotions are any different to anybody else's. Like, just because that is that's like my mental emergency right there. But your or somebody that's listening to this, their feelings are still valid. Like, and we're all vulnerable people at the end of the day, and you can build up walls as much as you like on not talking about it and thinking that you are tough and all the rest of it. But trust me when I say this, um, when I just let go of the fact that I wasn't going to talk about it, and I let people in and let them understand what I was going through, it it changed my life. It really did change my life. And like I said, like, having those people to lean on, especially the brotherhood I've got with the firefighters, it that saved my life more than anything. um and having a community around you, having friends and close family, I can't tell you how important that is. That for me was massive, and without it, I don't want to. I don't know if I could really want to say this, but I could imagine a world where I wouldn't be here today without that. Um, so yeah, don't be scared to share it. Find your people and let out that emotion. It's good for you. To talk. It really is. Yeah.
Carl, thank you for being so open and honest with everything today. This has felt like a really important conversation. It's felt like one that's broken down quite a few barriers, I think, for people listening, and guys that I speak to, whether they realize it or not, sometimes just need permission to be able to talk. And it sounds like you went through exactly the same experience yourself. And I think what you've done today is hopefully given a lot of guys permission to feel and talk about how they're feeling, which is an incredible gift. So thank you very much for that.
No, not a problem, mate. Yeah, something I'm pretty passionate about, and hopefully somebody takes something from this conversation.